In every neighborhood, there are moments that change everything. Streets that once echoed with the laughter of children or the ordinary sounds of daily life suddenly become crime scenes that will never be forgotten. This is the story of a chilling murder, captured entirely on camera in the middle of broad daylight. It is the story of a crime that shocked not only the people who lived in that community, but also the detectives who had to piece together how something so brazen could unfold in front of so many eyes, yet remain shrouded in mystery for so long. The victim was a man named David Renshaw, a 39-year-old father of two. David lived a seemingly ordinary life in a quiet suburban neighborhood. He worked in construction and was described as a devoted family man. His neighbors often saw him working on his yard, playing catch with his sons, or chatting with his wife on the porch during warm evenings. To everyone who knew him, David was the last person one would expect to become the target of such a vicious crime. Yet as the investigation later revealed, the surface of someone's life can hide secrets that no one would dare imagine. On the morning of August 14th, David left his home to run errands. It was just after 11 a.m., and the sun was high in the sky. People were walking their dogs, children were playing outside, and the usual hum of suburban life was alive. What nobody knew was that just minutes later, one of the most chilling events in the neighborhood's history would unfold. Multiple CCTV cameras installed along the main street would capture every second of what happened next. At 11:23 a.m., footage from a corner store camera showed David walking casually down the street, carrying a small grocery bag. He appeared relaxed, unaware of anything unusual. But in the frame, a second figure could be seen. A man wearing a dark hoodie, despite the warm summer weather, was following him at a measured distance. His face was partially obscured, and he kept his head lowered. The store clerk, who later reviewed the footage, recalled how unnerving it was to watch. The suspect appeared calculated, moving slowly, never letting his distance from David widen too much, yet never close enough to raise suspicion. This was not a random encounter. The suspect was hunting. A second camera positioned outside a cafe captured the moment the suspect quickened his pace. David paused briefly, perhaps to check his phone, unaware that his stalker was closing in. Within seconds, the man in the hoodie lunged. What followed was a sudden, brutal attack in broad daylight. The footage, though grainy, showed the suspect pulling out a large knife and stabbing David repeatedly. The violence was shocking in its speed and intensity. David struggled, trying desperately to defend himself, but the attack was relentless. Pedestrians screamed, some froze in shock, while others scattered in panic. A mother grabbed her child and ran across the street. A cyclist dropped his bike and sprinted for cover. Yet despite the chaos, the most haunting detail was the silence of the attack. The suspect said nothing. No threats, no shouts, just cold and calculated violence. It was as though he had rehearsed every move in his mind. Within less than a minute, David collapsed on the pavement. His attacker stood over him briefly, as if ensuring the job was finished, before fleeing down an alley. For detectives, this was both a blessing and a nightmare. The crime had been caught from multiple angles, leaving little doubt about what had happened. But the killer's face remained obscured, and his identity was still hidden in shadows. When paramedics arrived, David was still alive, but barely. Witnesses described him gasping for breath, his white shirt stained red. He was rushed to the hospital, but despite the best efforts of doctors, he succumbed to his injuries. The community, which had gathered anxiously outside the crime scene tape, fell into silence as the news spread. A father, a husband, and a neighbor was gone, and his life had been stolen in the middle of the day in front of people who would never forget what they had seen. The investigation that followed revealed disturbing truths. Detectives began by interviewing every witness they could find. Some described the suspect's height, others noticed the peculiar way he walked with a slight limp. One teenager, who had been recording a video on her phone at the time, provided crucial footage that captured the attacker's getaway. In the background of her video, the hooded man could be seen discarding something metallic into a dumpster. When police searched the area, they discovered a blood-stained knife wrapped in a cloth. The weapon matched the wounds inflicted on David. Forensic experts quickly began processing the evidence, searching for fingerprints, DNA, or anything that could lead them to the suspect. But it was the CCTV footage itself that became the cornerstone of the investigation. Detectives spent hours analyzing every frame, studying the suspect's movements, his timing, even the way he held the weapon. One investigator later said that watching the footage over and over again was like staring into the mind of a predator. Every movement was intentional, every step was measured. This was not a random act of violence, it was a planned execution. So the question became, who wanted David dead? When detectives began to dig into David's life, the perfect image of a devoted family man began to show cracks. They discovered that he had recently been involved in a heated dispute at work. David had exposed unsafe practices on a construction site, which had led to costly delays and fines for the company. Some of his co-workers had been furious with him. Could someone have wanted revenge? At the same time, whispers of trouble in his personal life emerged. Neighbors reported hearing arguments between David and his wife late at night. Though nothing concrete surfaced at first, detectives wondered if someone closer to him might have played a role. After all, the attack was too precise, too personal to be random. What was most unsettling, however, was the realization that the killer had chosen to strike in broad daylight. Most murders are crimes of opportunity or passion, often hidden under the cover of darkness. But this suspect wanted to send a message. Killing David in front of witnesses was a way of ensuring maximum fear, not just for the victim, but for everyone who saw it. And here is where the story takes an even darker turn. During the investigation, detectives obtained footage from a traffic camera 2 blocks away from the scene. What they found was chilling. Just 15 minutes before the attack, the same hooded suspect had been sitting on a bench, watching David from a distance. It was as if he had been tracking him, waiting for the right moment. Even more disturbing, another camera showed a black car parked nearby with its engine running. When the suspect fled down the alley, he was seen getting into that car, which sped away almost instantly. This discovery raised the possibility that the killer was not acting alone. Was this part of a larger plan? Was David targeted by a group rather than an individual? The community remained on edge. Parents kept their children inside, businesses closed early, and the once lively neighborhood fell into a tense silence. Detectives worked around the clock, releasing still images from the CCTV footage to the public, hoping someone might recognize the killer's walk, his build, or the car that helped him escape. Weeks later, a breakthrough came. A tip led investigators to a man named Victor Hale, a former co-worker of David. Victor matched the description of the suspect, and more importantly, he had a criminal record that included assault and intimidation. Detectives tracked him down, and when they searched his apartment, they found clothing matching what was worn during the murder, hidden in a closet. DNA tests linked him to the knife found in the dumpster. When confronted with the evidence, Victor initially denied everything, but under pressure, his story began to unravel. Detectives uncovered that he had been paid by someone else to carry out the attack. The truth was darker than anyone expected. David had not just angered his company, he had exposed financial fraud that involved several high-ranking individuals. His murder was a silencing tactic, designed to send a message to anyone else who might consider speaking out. This revelation shook the community even further. The chilling murder that everyone had witnessed was not just a crime of passion, but a calculated assassination. David had become the target of people who feared what he knew, and they had used Victor to do their dirty work. In the end, Victor was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, but questions remained about who else was behind the plan. Detectives continued to pursue leads, but as with many cases involving powerful individuals, answers were not easy to find. The memory of David's final moments, caught forever on camera, remains haunting. The footage serves as a reminder of how fragile life is, how quickly normality can be shattered, and how sometimes the most chilling crimes are not hidden in darkness, but committed in plain sight, where the world cannot look away. For the people who lived in that neighborhood, nothing was ever the same again. The streets where children once played now carried the weight of trauma. The corner store, the cafe, the alleyway, all of them became reminders of a crime too brutal to forget. This case will forever be remembered not only for the cruelty of the act, but for the way it was carried out, in broad daylight, in silence, and under the unblinking gaze of cameras that could capture the horror but could not prevent it.